Greetings, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We had some minor technical difficulties just now, so thank you for your patience as we got started. We are so pleased to welcome Neon Hemlock back to our live stream with Lost City Books. But before we begin, just a few things. If you have never heard of us before, we are Lost City Books, a used, new, and rare bookstore located in Adams Morgan in Washington, D.C. And we're staffed by a bunch of really cool folks that care a lot about books, especially speculative fiction and queer literature. So we've got a double whammy of awesomeness to share with you today. Before we get started, I'll give you a little bit of information about our contributors tonight. L.D. Lewis does, well, a lot. She's an award-winning SF/F, so that's science fiction and fantasy, writer and editor, and publisher at Fireside Fiction as of July 2021. She serves as a founding creator, art director, and project manager for the World Fantasy Award-winning and Hugo Award-nominated Faya Literary magazine. She also serves as the founding director of Hugo-nominated FayaCon, chair of the 2021 Nebula Conference, and awards manager for the Lambda Literary Foundation. She also acquires novellas for Tor.com and researches for the LeVar Burton Reads podcast. Oh, that's awesome. I want to hear about that later. She frequently bothers the publishing industry by authoring studies about the treatment and experiences of racially and ethnically marginalized authors in speculative literature. She's the author of A Ruin of Shadows, and her published short fiction and poetry includes appearances in Faya, Podcastle, Strange Horizons, Anathema, Spec from the Margins, Lightspeed, and Fireside magazine, among others. She lives in Georgia on perpetual deadline with her coffee habit and an impressive Funko Pop collection. Sam J. Miller's books have been called must-reads and bests of the year by USA Today, Entertainment Weekly, NPR, and the Oprah magazine, among others. He's the Nebula Award-winning author of Blackfish City, which has been translated into 6 languages and won the hopefully soon to be renamed John W. Campbell Memorial Award. Sam's short stories have won a Shirley Jackson Award and been nominated for the World Fantasy, Theodore Sturgeon, and Locus Awards, and have been reprinted in dozens of anthologies. He's also the last in a long line of butchers. He lives in New York City and at samjmiller.com. Shinja, I'm sorry, you weren't here earlier. Would you mind saying your name for me? Shingai. Thank you. Shingai Kagunda is an Afro-surreal/futurist storyteller from Nairobi, Kenya, with a literary arts MFA from Brown. Shingai's work has been featured in the Best American Sci-Fi and Fantasy 2020, Year's Best African Speculative Fiction 2021, and Year's Best Dark Fantasy and Horror 2020. She has work in or upcoming in Omanana, Fantasy Magazine, Fractured Lit, Choreo, Africa Risen, and Uncanny Magazine. Her debut novella, and This Is How to Stay Alive, was published by Neon Hemlock Press in October 2021. She is the co-editor of Podcastle magazine and the co-founder of Voodoo Knots. Shingai is a creative writing teacher, an eternal student, and a lover of all things soft and Black. Me too. Sherry Kamei, writer by trade, choice and hope, cis lesbian, she, her, Japanese/Okinawan American, and very tired all the time. Relatable. Currently a basement goblin filing papers in the bowels of a library. Resides in Honolulu, Hawaii with her wife, plants, and a corgi named Charlie. Floral print disaster. That was a big mouthful, but without anything further, I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
I forgot I was muted. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. So excited to be here.
So I'm really excited about this anthology, this collection here, because personally, as a queer person and a big sci-fi nerd, you're combining two of my my main interests and main identifiers. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what this what this collection means to each of you and what draw you to contribute to it. And then we can talk a little bit more about your individual contributions.
I can kick that off. I co-edited this with Charles Pacer, who is the series editor, and who I guess founded the whole project. But I was very excited to be solicited for participation, I guess, in this way. Editing a reprint anthology means that I am almost literally like standing on the shoulders of giants. These are things that have already been geniusly edited by other people, and I'm just kind of curating them. And so a lot of these stories that I already come across sort of organically doing research for LeVar's podcast. And I was excited, for the opportunity to kind of put them together into a collection that has like this cover is gorgeous. I love Paul Kellum, who is the cover artist, and have commissioned him a number of times for other things. So it's just like all of my favorite things and all of my favorite people and all of my favorite stories. I got to just kind of put together, and now I have a souvenir that people actually got paid for. So that's been fun. Shingai's also an Ignite Award winner, and I run the Ignite Awards. And Sam's book, what is it? Boys, Beasts, and Men is actually in my living room right now. I'm the Lammy Awards person, and that was recently submitted, and I was very excited to get that in there. So I am just like tangentially like attached to everyone who's here and who's involved, and I'm glad to be here with y'all tonight.
Thank you.
I can go next. It's such an honor to be like sharing space with LD and Sam and Sherry and like yeah, I came to this project. My story was picked and I was just like, what? It was really incredible. My story was published in Baffling magazine through Neon Hemlock and Dave's work, and it just for some reason happened to be chosen, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share space with other queer storytellers.
Yeah, I can go next too. I'm not sure what the selection process was, but it's not that we contributed, I guess we were informed that, oh, would you like to be included, which was such a wonderful surprise. My story, Blood in the Thread, was published on Tor.com last year. So I guess they were pulling from all these short stories that were published either digitally or in print, and somehow they rounded up all the queer ones, and we all got to play together in that way. So I thought that was really cool, and it does mean a lot to me to be picked for this queer representation that kind of often gets pushed to the wayside a little bit, especially in speculative fiction.
Yeah, and I was also super honored and excited to get the request, and I also really love the cover. It's so beautiful. But it's also like, just thinking about it, like such an exciting moment. Like there has always been queer speculative fiction, but the fact that there's so much of it right now that's being published and finding a home, and that the major markets and some of the semi-pro and amateur and smaller markets as well are publishing amazing stuff that we can have like a best of. Like that's a beautiful moment and a beautiful thing, and it's a real honor to be in the mix here, because like so many of my faves and buddies are in here. So yeah, what a fun crew to hang out with.
Thank you. Now, so you all have really different backgrounds as writers, and I'm really curious about how each of you kind of got drawn into the specific type of writing that you do, and where your voice kind of comes from, or how you developed and grew it over time.
I'm just going to start calling on people. Sam, go for it.
Damn it. No, thank you. It's a great question that I don't feel like I can answer in less than 10 minutes. I always say I started telling stories because I was really unpopular in second grade. I was bad at sports, and nobody liked me. And so I would tell people that I had seen horror movies that I hadn't actually seen, but they hadn't seen them either, so they didn't know. So I would stretch it out over weeks and tell them the same stories over and over, like stretch out the movie. And so that's where my storytelling comes from, telling lies to strangers so they'll like me. And yeah, that's all I've been doing. That's all I've been doing ever since.
Okay, Aldi, I see your eyes. I really love the idea of telling lies to strangers so that they will like me. Like that's that's a line in a book. Yeah, I think for me, I was always obsessed with stories, like ever since I was a child. And then I think I got to a place where I was writing stories about people who didn't look like me because those were the stories that I was consuming, which happens to be the origin story of a lot of Black and Brown people across the diaspora. And then I when I started realizing that there was space for me to tell stories about myself and about people who have an experience that is on the margins of society. I just delved into that head first, and it's been such a beautiful journey ever since. I think my work has transitioned from just like Black fantasy, spec fic to like Afrofuturism to Afrosurrealism, and now I'm just and back to just Black spec fic and everything that falls under that. I think it's tied to spiritual practices and tied to community, and like a lot of the work that I create is because of the people who I get to exist around. Yeah.
This is a tough one. I'm not as cool as these other authors, obviously, but I feel like my writing stems from this really uncool place of like blogging on Xanga and MySpace and that kind of stuff, where I'm trying to talk to myself to figure stuff out, especially as like a second, third generation Japanese American and queer, and like that doesn't jive with, you know, who you're supposed to be kind of thing. So I feel like I started telling stories to inform myself. And I don't really know where the speculative part comes in, because I like for school, undergrad and graduate school, I feel like I tried to be really like literary fiction. This is where the serious people write. And then once I graduated, it just became not my sandbox anymore, and started looking into, you know, all this. Well, a lot of the queer representation I was finding was in speculative fiction, which seemed like a bigger place to play and not really focus so much on like, you know, the usual coming out story and you know, it's hard to be a gay person kind of story that you see in those, which isn't a bad thing, and those are necessary stories, but I wanted to go a different route kind of with it. So yeah, I don't know, I'm just saying words.
That's all stories are, words. I was a contributor to the first iteration of Wayfair. So last year, all of my writing is more or less experimental. I came into spec fic to do long form fiction. Like I thought that short story writing was impossible. So each time I write one, it's to challenge myself to tell a certain story in a certain length, and to see if I'm good at writing a fight scene or something that's thematically horror or liminal spaces, stuff like that. I have no idea what I was experimenting with. I think it was like writing the story I wrote for 2020, the current Dumas. I think that was like a fever dream. I don't remember doing it. But I think it was like, oh no, I agreed to do this. It's got to be gay. I like trains, and that's where it went. I have no idea. And then it was like, oh no, there's a deadline. Let's develop a plot, and that's that's where it went. Then it ended up in a best of, and it's the first and I think only best of I've been in so far. So here's some more things. Oh no, I'm Shirley Jackson award nominated now. And I completely forgot about that just now for more Neon Hemlock involvement. So that's cool. I didn't know I could do horror, but now I do.
Awesome. I love that you entirely forgot a whole award, but
I did, and then also in the bio, I forgot that Phi is now Hugo Award winning, no longer just nominated. So there's also that. I got a lot going on. I'm doing too much. I'm forgetting stuff.
that was a super long list of awards, nominations, and projects. So
It's always terrifying, like watching somebody read my bio. I'm like, oh no, this is gonna go on for so long.
it's worth it though.
It's fun.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the stories in We're Here. And I know, LD, that you were editor on this one. So I'd love to hear a bit about sort of what the editing process looks like for you and what drew you in about some of the stories. And then from each of you contributors also, tell me a little bit about the story that you wrote for We're Here, or that found its way into We're Here. And then we can go from there.
Sure. So Charles and I kind of put together a short list of it was something like, I think, 50 titles. And then I think based on like what we could tie together thematically, I think we kind of like narrowed down our decisions from there. And that was like kind of my job. Charles was like, here's the 50. And I'm like, okay, let me make some kind of sense out of it. For me, I think I selected based on voice and just like how dynamic the stories were on their own. I don't think that necessarily when you're putting together an anthology, the story should feel like they are related to one another. I think that like on their own merits, on their own journey, from the author's perspective specifically, if it executed what it tried to do well. And that's what all of the stories we ended up picking did. And there were a couple that I'm very upset did not make it in, but constraints being what they are. One of the points I tried to make in my kind of introductory note in We're Here is that there are so many more queer stories or LGBTQ or whatever term you want to use. There are so many more of these stories than you think that there are. And if you just do the reading, it's to the point where now you don't have to go specifically to a queer publication in order to find them. They're literally everywhere. And I want whoever needs to take that as a threat to do that, to take it as a threat, because we are here. We are literally everywhere. And I'm glad I got to put together this specific here, as opposed to all the other heres there are. I'm gonna call on Sherry now.
Okay, so my short story in We're Here is Blood in the Thread, which is kind of a retelling of a Japanese folktale, The Crane Wife, which the traditional narrative is basically a woodsman finds a crane that's been shot down. Next day, this strange lady appears and they get married, and she helps him by secretly weaving, and you find out later it's the crane in disguise, and she's weaving her feathers into this silk that he sells. And then I don't actually remember the ending right now, but I believe like she flies away. That's it. That's the end. Because he discovered her secret. And I always really fixated on this tale because I really like the Decemberist album, The Crane Wife, which is based on the same thing. And we remember the crane a lot, but not really the woman who is really sacrificing. So I turned it into kind of a queer love story of sacrifice, and somehow makeup got involved. And then it was also like maybe magic. So yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I feel like it's rehashing that thing where I'm trying to figure out my queer identity with my Japanese identity, and it becomes a narrative for me to dialogue with myself kind of, but also hopefully with other readers who can relate. That's what I contributed.
I loved it, and thank you for writing it.
Oh, thank you.
Shingai?
Yeah. It was really beautiful. First of all, Cherry, I also read the story, and it was really, really beautiful. And I deeply resonate with the like trying to reconcile your queer identity to your ethnic or racial identity, and like having both those things in conversation with each other. For those who may not know, being queer in Kenya is illegal. So it definitely has been a journey for me to just like process queerness while also being in conversation with my Blackness. And the story is actually one of my favorite things that I've written. It's called To Exhale Sky. And I love it so much because I got to write these really joyous, like bathroom kisses scenes and like laughing at everything and like just the world looking really beautiful when you're in love. And I really enjoyed writing that, and I really enjoy reading it. And with it, there's also the moments of like when the love interest is sick, the family comes in and asks, "Who are you?" And her girlfriend says, "I'm just a friend," because like that's that's the reality of that situation. For her to be allowed to be in that space at that time with a person who she loves dearly. Yeah, and then the elements of it that were magical were surrealist elements. So this character is able to like breathe in or breathe out stars and breathe in continents and the sky and like just hold things inside of her, and like releasing things is an expression of her grief, like tangible things, but she also inhales things into herself, which I think for me was also a practice of what to do with all the big feelings. Yeah.
Awesome. My story is called Let All the Children Boogie, which is a line from David Bowie's Starman, which is one of my favorite songs. And it's sort of about the now lost loneliness of being a 90s queer kid in the middle of nowhere, and listening to the radio and hearing weird songs that you've never heard before and that you may never hear again, right? Like you didn't have Shazam, you heard a song and you maybe heard the end of it and you couldn't look it up. You couldn't be like, what the fuck was that? And so like the first time that I heard Iggy Pop's The Passenger on the radio, I was like, oh my God, I'm in love with this song, but it's gone, now it's gone. And the record store in Hudson didn't have it. So it's sort of about that, and about how that also shapes like, being queer and being alone and not having a community, and not having an internet in which to find people who are like you, because the internet didn't exist for us. I'm sure it existed. It didn't exist in Hudson. So yeah, that finding community in music and art and in people, and in like when you first like make a connection with somebody who you're super into. And then there's also a mysterious alien broadcast that is maybe from the future, because you got to add that.
I feel like if an alien broadcast from the future belongs anywhere, it's in a story named after a David Bowie song. That seems perfectly logical to me. Wonderful. Let me ask, I want to give you all each the opportunity to read a short piece of either the story that you contributed to We're Here or something else that you want to share tonight. But I want to ask if any of you have had the opportunity to read each other's work. And if so, what were some things that stood out to you about each other's work?
Like out loud or just generally?
Just have you read it at all?
Well, I can say that I was very privileged to be Shingai's instructor at Clarion, the Clarion workshop this summer. And Shingai's writing is amazing and is so full of joy and love and brilliance that it brings me deep joy. And I'm also a big fan of Els. I was just a juror for the Shirley Jackson Awards. Yeah, big fan.
Did I know that?
I don't.
I gotta sleep more. What is happening? But thank you.
We're all doing too much. So yeah. Sherry, I can't wait to read yours.
Yeah, I mean, I again got to have Sam as my instructor, and Sam did this gorgeous reading when we were in San Diego of one of his stories from his book, Boys and Beasts. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam. I'm sorry.
Boys Beats Men, but it's fine.
Boys Beast Men. And I did get a copy of Boys Beast Men. And I just love how sexy Sam's writing is. Like, it's just very there's no hiding from it. Like, you immediately are confronted with, like, we are here and we are queer. And it's always so steamy and so fun. And I got to read Sherry's story, and we're here actually, and it was such a beautiful experience. And I've come across some of LD's work on the internet, and I obviously just adore her as a whole human being. So yeah.
I love this whole conversation, just be able to hype other people, because I remember reading Sam's on tour. I was so excited we were tour siblings that way, and being just blown away by the music references, especially because that's also my childhood, and not really thinking about this whole time travel thing until the very end, and I really loved it. And then I only came across you guys in the anthology, and I was just telling her it was such a perfect end to the whole anthology, where it's so joyous and beautiful and really celebrates queer love in a way that I feel like mine was kind of a downer, which is part of the experience too. So it was good. It was kind of in the middle and definitely not towards the end. So yeah, I really appreciated that. And LD is just legendary. I mean, based off of her bio too, but I've read her work online as well. Yeah, this is awesome. Let's keep going.
Well, LD is
what? I mean, obviously I've read everyone's work here. So I didn't think I needed to contribute. I thought that was clear. So I'm just gonna
great. I love how much you all admire each other. That's a good sign about the cohesiveness and beauty of We're Here. So without any more preamble, I would love to let each of you read a selection from either the story that you wrote for We're Here, or if you have something else prepared, that's great too.
Elle, tell us what order we go in.
You spoke.
Okay, you spoke up first. Oh, there you go.
It did occur to me as soon as I unmuted that this was a danger. I'm sorry. It is what I deserve. I'm just going to read a short excerpt from the beginning of Let All the Children Boogie. Radio was where we met. Our bodies first occupied the same space on a Friday afternoon, but our minds had already connected Thursday night. Coming up on 12 o'clock, awake when we shouldn't be, both of us in our separate narrow beds, miles and miles apart, tuning into Miss Jackson's graveyard shift, spirits linked up in the gruff, cigarette-damaged sound of her voice. She'd played The Passenger by Iggy Pop. I had never heard it before, and it changed my life. Understand, there was no internet then, no way to look up the lyrics online, no way to snap my fingers and find the song on YouTube or iTunes. I was crying by the time it was over, knowing it might be months or years before I found it again. Maybe I never would. Those 4 guitar chords were seared indelibly into my mind, the lonesome sound of Iggy's voice certain to linger there for as long as I lived, but the song itself was already out of reach as it faded down to nothing. And then a squall of distortion interrupted, stuttering into staticky words, saying what might have been, "Are you out there?" before vanishing again. Eerie, but no more eerie than the tingly feeling I still had from Iggy Pop's voice and the sadness of losing the song forever. But then, the next day at the Salvation Army, thumbing through hundreds of dresses I hated, what did I hear but, "I am the passenger, and I ride and I ride." Not from the shitty in-store speakers. Someone was singing, someone magnificent, like pawn shop royalty in an indigo velvet blazer with 3 handkerchiefs tied around one forearm and brown corduroy bell-bottoms. I see things from under glass. The singer must have sensed me staring because they turned to look in my direction. Shorter than me, hair buzzed to the scalp except for a single spiked stripe down the center. The graveyard shift, I said, trembling. You were listening last night? Yeah, they said, and their smile was summer, was weekends, was Miss Jackson's raspy, sweet voice. The whole place smelled like mothballs, and the scent had never been so wonderful. You too? My mind had no need for pronouns, or words at all for that matter. This person filled me up from the very first moment. That's all I'll do for now. Buy the book. Read the book. I pass it to Sherry.
Yeah, there we go.
I will also read from We're Here, So Blood and the Thread. And mine is from the beginning of the story. Today, she says, we are women who are actually cranes. Her hair is loose and her face is bare. Off to the side, her wedding dress lies strewn across an entire hotel room bed, train trickling down, a stream of white silk shot through with crimson ribbon. Do you remember, she asked? You remember. You hated that story when you were younger. The molting feathers, the discovery, the betrayal, the abrupt, unsatisfactory conclusion. Hey, she says. The engagement band on her delicate finger gleams in the light. It's only a story, and today we are cranes because I say we are beautiful, beautiful cranes. She tips your chin and her kiss is a resolution, not a promise. You shouldn't have agreed to see her before the nuptials, but she asked, and you can never say no. Okay, you say. You unpack your bag, lay out the tools of your trade, the colors and powders and stains. While her face is still naked and true, you reach out, cup her cheek, whisper, marry me. You will never tire of saying it. Everything from the fading stars to the hotel Bible holds its breath. She beams. She breaks into helpless laughter. She gestures at the wedding gown and presses your hands to her tired face. You nod and pull yourself together, stretch her arm out toward you and begin to dream of wings. Once upon a time, there lived a man who found a wounded crane upon his doorstep. Deep in the bird's breast lay a fletched arrow. A slick spill of blood stained her feathers a furious shade of red, the exact shade of a poppy gone to rot. The man pressed his hands to the wound, and beneath the squelch and gore, he felt a heart that still fought, pounding back against his palm. He had no obligation to the crane, but its beauty, its tragic majesty moved him. I will care for you, he told the crane. I promise, I promise, I promise. That's it for me.
Okay, I think I'm gonna read from a story I actually wrote over the summer for Clarion that's just been accepted for publication in Lightspeed. So, woo! And this section, the main character, her name is Karu, and she is having conversations with a deity named Mombi, who is the creator. So Mombi loves to tell stories, she admits to Karu. Of course, that is the reason the galaxy exists. What is the universe but every story? And what is the point of every story then, Karu asks. You ask for points as if stories are pencils, eh? The creator responds. When here in everything, you will not find a tip. The only meaning is that it exists. She laughs. Stories are simply for play, like music is to dance and work is to experiment. And Karu asks, then what is your favorite story? The creator smiles, pleased with the question. We're on our way to it. And Karu sees a burning star in the distance, not too far away from the water planet. She settles into the juxtaposition of physical sensation, holding on to the wetness of the sea while anticipating the heat emanating from the star. She is distracted by the conversation with Mombi, not paying attention to how time is moving or not moving. And unlike the water planet, Karu does not land on or in the star. Instead, they stop just short of it and watch as its story unfolds backwards. First, there is mass, darkness with a density that echoes to the point of pushing against Karu's skin. Then it retracts, glowing as it folds in on itself, pulling age-old particles of light and heat and gravity, a dip in space-time. Then it starts again, this time at the beginning and not the end. The star narrates its own death in the voice of a little boy. Are you not scared? Karu asks in awe of the massive burning body. Not really. the star says softly, blazing brighter and more crisp. Where will you go after? Karu asks. I'll start again, the star responds, in a different amalgamation. Will you know you are you? And this is the big question, the one that Karu has held close to her chest. She asks it differently. Will you still know those who knew you? And the star says, let me show you. And Karu looks at Mombi, the creator, who smiles gently, nodding, releasing her hold on the girl. The ball of fire draws her in, and it hurts. God, it hurts everywhere. Her chest burns, the tears falling down her face scald her cheeks. Her skin melts and grows over and over again, and her broken heart is being pounded on with a searing hammer. The star sucks her in, siphoning her memories, and she thinks, finally, this pain makes sense. The physicality of it matches the dark inside her she has not been ready to see. The one she covered because she had to continue fucking living. And then in an instant, or a millennia, she's at the heart of the star and it is green. There is a plant, an aloe vera plant that has covered the walls of the inside of the star, expanding and taking up space. A leaf slithers its way to her, opening itself up so that its gel is squeezing out and nearly dripping. Karu reaches down and scoops up the salve, applying it over her whole body, and instantly feels the tangibly soothing relief. She exhales air. She is just a human after all. A little boy in a Maasai shuka appears from somewhere in the star and giggles. I'm going to stop there.
I'm not reading. One, I'm not following that. But two, also, if anyone watching who's ever had Invisalign, my mouth don't work right now. So I'm not gonna read and lisp my way through it. But I think it's evident why all these stories were chosen based on those excerpts. So buy the thing.
Absolutely. Each of your excerpts were so unique and beautiful. I'm so pleased and privileged to have listened to them. Just a reminder to our viewers that if you have any questions, you can type them as a comment. I see a lot of comments some of them are just say, which I think is positive, So thank you for those. We've got some jazz hands and some really lovely comments. So I hope all of you folks here in the Zoom with me get a chance to go and take a look at those. But some questions that I have, and this is a question for everyone, is when you're writing a story, when you're when you're beginning a story, or when you're starting to formulate a story, a short story, do you find that you start with something, you start with a message or an idea that that is like completely formed and you need to get it out? Or do you kind of just start and you wander your way through the story until you find yourself at the end? I know that different writers have different methods, and I'm really interested in what each of you does in the process of writing your stories.
Definitely not a fully formed idea first. Usually it is there's a song or like a fragment of a sentence or something that sparks something. And I think I build a scenario out of one of those, and then somehow it turns into a story. I don't think I've ever written anything that was fully like I knew what it was going to look like beginning, middle, and end before I started it. Mostly the music thing though. The songs trigger a lot.
What's the last song that sparked a story for you?
Last song. What's the last story I wrote? God, I'm tired. Okay, my novella, A Ruin of Shadows. Part of that narrative was based off of Lupe Fiasco's Hello, Goodbye. And like, I think if you read that and also listen to the song, you're like, oh my God, it's the same thing. It's very evident, like it's very clear. That's probably the main one. Like all of my stories end up with playlists. Jasira, which is the first story I ever published, back in what 2017, 2018. First thing I ever wrote, that had a playlist. It's not like restricted to genre or anything. It's I have chromesthesia, which kind of blends and mixes up sound and color, essentially. So a song will establish either a narrative thread or a palette, and I will take it from there.
That's really cool. That must be a really amazing experience inside of your head.
It's fun. I think it leads to a lot of depth of atmosphere in my writing, and then a lot of I think I pay more attention to sensory detail just because that's my experience as I process things in the real world. And then, like, for the purposes of publishing, you have to pare things back. And I'm like, oh, regular people are just fine with this scant level of detail. But it's fun when I get to put out something that captures that full experience of how I see things. I haven't gotten to do it yet. I've written it. I haven't published it, but one day.
I'll go. And just yeah, I usually get weird little pieces of story, like wouldn't it be cool if somebody had this supernatural ability, or in this particular nightmarish future. And so usually they're like small pieces that are bouncing around in my brain, and it's not until like two of them combine, like what if this supernatural ability was in this nightmarish future, or what if this song that I'm obsessed with, I also take a lot of inspiration from music. This character is the perfect vehicle for telling the story that this song is sparking in me. But usually, and I don't usually do like a rigorous outline, but I usually don't start the actual writing of a story until I have the title, the first sentence, and the last sentence. And that sort of like tells me what the character's journey is. And I don't know what's going to happen along the way. I just know that they're going to start here and end here. And then the writing of it is where I figure out all the stuff in between.
Does the last line always remain, or does it change?
It often remains. Sometimes it needs to be refined, but I'm very particular about last sentences. I always feel like the last sentence has to be like the dagger in the heart of love or happiness or whatever. So yeah, I always want my last sentences to be perfect. The other sentences can be just okay.
That's incredible and fascinating to me. I would never dream of trying to write my last sentence because I always meander my way there, and then it's always a panic to be like, oh God, how do I end this? So that's really interesting.
What can I just interject at this point, because
Sure.
I need to give credit where credit is due, because my clarion instructor, Ted Chiang, that's where I got that, because he also never starts a story until he knows the last sentence. So I expanded on a little bit, but I do want to make clear that that is one of many astonishing wisdoms of Ted Chiang.
He's my favorite. I'm so glad you said that.
I guess I was just going to add.
Too. Sorry.
Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so jealous. My writing process, I guess, I feel like it's reactionary in comparison to everybody else's, where I engage with a piece of media and I'm like either angry or really happy. I want to try to expand on it or react to it somehow. Some of my current works, I'm working on a space horror that I'm hoping to be a novel eventually. I feel like it's a reaction to Firefly, where it's a very Oriental-esque inspired world with no actual Asian people. So I feel like in my mind, it's, oh, then I'll write the space story with the Asian people kind of thing. So, and I don't outline either. So I'm always impressed by people who outline rigorously beforehand, and then they just breeze through the story, where I'm still like revising the same paragraph for like 10 days and then trying to figure it out. So yeah, I'm always intrigued by everybody else's processes.
I think in a similar vein, I'm usually responding to something. So something that is like a question that I want to answer, which is also something that Ted Chiang talked about when he taught us, which is every story that he writes is like a question that he's trying to solve, a puzzle that he's trying to solve. And I really resonate with that. I think for me, it's like, what philosophical idea am I obsessed with in the moment? Or what history hasn't been told that I want to expound on? That's a really big one for my work. And what is happening now that is influenced by a history that only had one dominant narrative, and how can I give a counter narrative to that? And I think a thing that I love to do is to play around with nonlinear conceptualizations of time. So I'm always like figuring out how to bring the past and the present and the future all into one shared space. And then the writing the story itself, I definitely don't outline. I'm like, by your LP told me the term for this and I forgot. By your pantsing? Yeah, I do a thing where like I maybe outline a scene, like I know what's going to happen at the end of the scene, but I don't know what's going to happen in the next scene. And like I have an average idea of where the story is going, but it's very open to change and open to a lot of interjections.
Thanks so much, everyone. I'm in love with hearing the different methods, and I'm actually surprised by how personalized your different story writing habits are. I think that sometimes people think of writing as sort of a formulaic process where, you know, there are the masters and you kind of copy what they do and hope for the best, right? But it's really inspiring to hear the different places that all of your stories come from. I'd like to hear a little bit about, we've got a few more minutes, to hear a little bit more about some of the writing that has taught you or that you've learned from over time. We talked a little bit about Ted Chiang just now, which made me want to go, but I'd love to hear a bit more about who you've learned from as a reader, and how that's informed your writing as well.
Sherry?
Oh, I was hoping to have a little more time to think, but I think one of my earliest encounters with like really queer writing was Jeanette Winterson, her novel Written on the Body, which is told from second point of view, which I also use you. And the gender of the narrator's love interests is never given. They're also a they them. So I feel like at first I was trying to imitate Jeanette Winterson's kind of style, and over time I developed my own voice. But part of who I'm influenced by today, I'm in a writing group with some authors that also live here. Kate Elliott is one of them. I'm hugely influenced by her ability to world build and her ability to ask questions that make you dig deeper into your own writing, so you're not just writing surface level. Emma Camden recently published Ronin in the Star Wars universe, really incorporating her Japanese culture into such a big piece of IP that blows my mind. So yeah, I don't consciously try to imitate anybody now, but I'm sure I do. Jeanette Winterson is always going to probably be my answer for that. So.
Sam?
I've got my Octavia Butler t-shirt on, Mind of My Mind, my favorite science fiction novel. You know, Octavia Butler like showed me how to write social justice stories, right? Like I've been a community organizer for many years, and reading Octavia, besides being like brilliant science fiction, is like really interesting stories about what social justice looks like and how to embody that in story. So definitely Octavia, a lot of Ted Chiang, Ray Bradbury, I think has a real lovely poetry to his writing that I read at a formative age. and yeah, billions of awesome writers that are escaping me now that I'm on the spot. But it's all Octavia and Ted.
LD.
Mm-mm.
I was just trying to see if it worked. I really like this question because I think I teach high schoolers creative writing, and I've taught undergrads before as well. And Voodoo Knots, which is the summer Afrofuturist workshop that I co-founded, we teach a bunch of people. And one of the things that I consistently say is when you read Coming to a Space, asking yourself, what does this writer give me permission to do? And it's one of the like probably the most valuable thing I learned in my MFA. Just close reading and asking yourself, what does this author or this writer or the storyteller give me permission to do in my own work? And I think for me, August Town is one that I keep giving flowers to because it's this beautiful Caribbean alternative history that like poses the question, what if it's not about what if the question is not whether you believe the story or not, but whether you don't believe the types of people who are telling the story now. I feel like I've slightly butchered it, but like that's that's the main idea, where like we give oral histories not as much value as we give the written versions of history that have been valued more, especially in Western society. Yeah, so August Town gave me permission to look to the stories of the aunties and to just hear the way they talk and like have those be just as valuable to write down and to have on paper and in written words. I think when it comes to Octavia Butler, 100%. And I actually got the Octavia Butler scholarship, which came with this pendant, which is Octavia designed it, and it's my favorite thing that I own. And right now I have been deeply obsessed with Akweke Medzi. Their work is incredible, and like everything they put out has just been blowing me away. I've been teaching a lot of it because it's spiritual, it's queer, it's radical, it's pushing against systems, and not giving two shits about who hears and who sees, and like this is what I've come to do. And so that gives me permission in a lot of ways. I think of older African writers who allowed me to get into speculative fiction. Chintu by Jennifer Nansubuga. She is incredible, and it's a gorgeous history of a gorgeous epic Ugandan history specifically. I think everyone should read it. The Old Drift by Namwali Serpel, who is an American Zambian writer. Also really beautiful, plays with multiple genres as like surrealist and futurist and literary and like all these different things. And a queer one that I really love is Under the Udala Trees, which is a Nigerian queer novel that is just really gorgeous. Yeah, and then the people that I'm in community with, I'm always learning from their work and the ways that they tell stories.
Thank you.
It's always very disappointing to have to follow Shingai because my responses are not nearly as poetic. Obviously, Octavia, Cherie Renee Thomas, who is an auntie, but still a peer. And I think it's just her energy. I've had the opportunity to meet and kind of hang out with her and sit next to her as we both lost Hugo Awards this year. And 9 Bar Blues, that collection I think was criminally underrated. But her atmosphere, the Blackness in her writing, all of that, it's a style that I appreciate, and I think it gives a lot of writers a lot of permission, especially in speculative fiction, where Black people are kind of exploring what this looks like for us, even outside of Afrofuturism specifically, like any other Black, subgenre. Here, Shuri is kind of a foremother of what that type of thing looks like. Who else? P. Jelly Clark, also contemporary. We're in a writing group together. Huge fan of literally everything he does. I love his voice and the way he sort of carved out a path with his own narratives that I don't think that you can compare to too many other writers who are in the field. Same thing with Tochi Onyebuchi, who carried my train when we won when Fire won. It's one and only Hugo. But the activism inherent in his narratives, I think is also very strong and something to kind of aspire to. It's not something that I think I do too much in my work, but I think he executes it like very well. And I'm very proud of his work.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I'm really pleased to have We're Here on our shelves at Lost City Books. And for those of you asking in the comments where you can hear the rest of these stories and learn more, you can buy the book at lostcitybookstore.com. I dropped the link in the chat for you. We have a bunch of great comments from folks appreciating that you have all shared your stories and your background and your inspiration. Many praises and compliments from all of our viewers. So thanks to all of our viewers for joining us this evening. Let's round it out with, where can our audience keep up with you if they want to keep up with your work?
Sam?
I am at SentenceBender on Twitter, and sam.j.miller on Instagram, and I'm at samjmiller.com.
Sherry?
I'm at Sherry_Kame on Twitter. I don't update a lot, but when I do, it is about my writing. And I'm at sherrykamewrites.com online, which I do try to update. So
Shingai?
I'm at Shingai Be Like on both Twitter and Instagram. Also follow Voodoo Knots because there's a lot of great stuff happening there.
And I am at Eldevillain, ELLE, on Twitter, and considerably less on Instagram. I don't understand it as a platform, and I won't. But I'm there. Also check out Faya Literary Magazine. We are at Faya, FIYAH Lit Mag on Twitter, and are more active on Instagram there. And also at fayalitmag.com. And that is a quarterly magazine. We publish Black speculative fiction, all digital issues. And we've been around since like 2016 and are still and will continue to kill it.
Thanks so much. And Dave, I don't know if you're available, but would you like to tell our audience a bit more about Neon Hemlock and how to keep up with what Neon Hemlock is doing?
Oh God, I'm in like a sweatshirt. I look a fool. Hey y'all, really cool to hear y'all in conversation and reading from your stories. And Shingai, thanks for teasing that Lightspeed story. Now I have to check that one out. Yeah, Neon Hemlock, we're here in DC. We started in 2019, publishing initially outrights, winning chapbook competitions because I thought I had a press lined up for them and then I didn't, and then I had to publish them myself. And then I've made all of these publishing decisions since then, including this series. So, which I've been really hyped to see how it has grown and transpired. I'm looking forward to where it's going to be in the future. Submissions for We're Here 2022, edited by Charles, of course, and Naomi Kanakia, are open now. So if you are writing those cool, rad, great queer stories, please send them over to us. We want to read them. yeah, and psyched to have the second event with Lost City. Thanks, Lost City, for hosting us. And yeah, buy that book or other books from Lost City because they're real cool, and we support indie bookstores in this house.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank all of you again for joining us tonight. To our viewers, if you want to keep up with future events at Lost City Books in Adams Morgan, we have in-person events as well as a good number of virtual events like this. So if you're not in the DC area, you can still join. And we always live stream our in-person events as well. So you'll be able to catch those on this YouTube channel that you're watching right now. In the meantime, go over to lostcitybookstore.com and check out all of the upcoming events that we have, as well as get yourself a copy of We're Here from Neon Hemlock because it is phenomenal. Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, and have a good night.